We've all heard that slogan, be kind. But here's the question that nobody dares ask in politics. What happens when kindness becomes policy and policy starts to reward deception? Today's speech isn't about hating refugees. It isn't about turning our backs on genuine people fleeing from difficult situations. It's about something much simpler. Who should come first when money, housing, schools and healthcare are already stretched? One politician stood up and asked exactly that. Predictably, parts of the chamber reacted as though he had suggested replacing the national anthem with the Darth Vader theme. Now listen carefully to what he says, and you may well agree with him or you may not agree with him. But I think the points that he raises definitely deserve to be heard, and so we shall hear them. Here we go.
I will be speaking in favour of the reform motion. I begin with a true story from when I was working as a supply teacher at a school in South Wales. One day, the deputy head told me that a 16-year-old asylum seeker, let's call him Andy, not his real name, from a French-speaking country was joining the school, and could I teach Andy some English? After about a week of one-to-one English lessons, I was told that the police had discovered a picture of Andy's ID on his phone, which showed that Andy was in fact 20 years old. I'd done my best to help this alleged child in need, and I felt that my kindness had been taken advantage of. And many in this country feel that our kindness is being abused. Of course, I'm not saying every asylum seeker is a liar. However, some are. This year, the BBC reported migrants falsely claiming domestic abuse or deceitfully claiming to be gay in order to claim asylum, in some cases successfully. Andy told me he waited 3 weeks in Calais before entering the UK illegally and then coming to Wales. Why did Andy, a French speaker, not stay in France? Well, the outgoing Prime Minister has himself acknowledged that the UK's current asylum regime is a significant pull factor, more permissive than the European mainstream. Immigration policy is, of course, reserved to Westminster. But Wales has an open border with England, and if the Welsh Government presents Wales as being uniquely welcoming through policies such as the Nation of Sanctuary, it should at least consider whether that reinforces the perception that we are an attractive destination. Let's not attract more Andys. But even in the case of genuine asylum seekers, I would argue that we should prioritise our own citizens.
Okay, so notice what happens whenever somebody raises the issue. Rather than answering the question, why do some people cross through various safe countries in order to get to Britain, England, the debate immediately shifts to being heartless and uncaring. It's the political equivalent of your smoke alarm going off in the kitchen because your kitchen's on fire, and somebody starts planning a meeting on whether or not the smoke alarm tone was inclusive enough. You don't have to agree with reform's conclusion to recognise that the question itself is perfectly legitimate.
Because it's not a case of do we help these asylum seekers or not. I put it to you that the bigger picture, a more accurate framing, is actually as follows. Here's an asylum seeker, here's a citizen in need. With our limited resources, do we prioritise the non-citizen or the citizen? Without hesitation, reforms say prioritise the citizen. It is virtuous, actually, to prioritise the citizen. No reasonable person in this chamber, if their family were in need, would give their food away to strangers while their own children go hungry. No major culture or religion, ancient or modern, east or west, says to help a stranger while your own children go hungry. Let me give a few examples. In Hinduism, the concept of dharma says that one's duty is firstly to those nearest to you. The Roman philosopher Cicero had a similar idea that the closest bond is that of the family, and next comes fellow citizens. St. Thomas Aquinas said, charity ought to be more abundant towards those who are more closely united to us. The New Testament says, anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith. So yes, love thy neighbour, but look after your own first. Mae'n ddrwg gennyf, ond hoffwn nhw wneud cynnydd.
I'm sorry, but I would like to make some progress.
It is a good Samaritan.
Okay.
Are you taking an intervention or not?
I'm not. Sorry.
He's not taking intervention.
I'll address that point later on. Okay. It is therefore a virtue to provide for your own first before helping others. If you're going to virtue signal with things like the nation of sanctuary, at least get your virtue the right way round. Put citizens first. You care about child poverty? Scrap the nation of sanctuary and help at least some of our own children who will go to bed hungry tonight. According to the official Welsh Government Child Poverty Strategy Monitoring Framework, in the 2022 to 2024 financial period, 9% of children in Wales, around 50,000 children, were living in material deprivation, which means their families cannot afford basic everyday essentials, directly leading to lives marked by hunger and cold. Those millions of pounds spent on the nation of sanctuary could help at least some of our own children in need.
This is where the debate becomes philosophical rather than emotional. Governments love telling taxpayers to cooperate, be compassionate, especially when they're spending somebody else's wallet instead of their own. Funny how politicians become strict accountants when old pensioners are asking for heating fuel allowance, but suddenly discover unlimited generosity when any other expensive government programme appears. It's amazing how elasticated the purse becomes when it belongs to everybody else. And that's the central question here, not whether compassion matters, but who politicians believe that they're primarily responsible for.
Of course, you remain free as individuals to help refugees with your own money. And in the parable of the Good Samaritan, Jesus was talking about individuals, not about the state. Okay? But this debate relates to taxpayers' money. To address the elephant in the room, you might say to me, but Josh, you're an immigrant. Let me be clear. I'm a citizen first, an immigrant second. As a citizen, I want what is best for this country, and putting citizens first is in the best interests of this country. That is why this immigrant, who is now a citizen, fully supports the reform motion to scrap the nation of sanctuary, because true virtue is looking after your own citizens first.
So there you are again. And like I said earlier, whether you agree with his points entirely or not, I imagine most of you probably will. The one thing that should concern us all is that the moment we stop debating difficult issues honestly, democracy starts to fail. Immigration, asylum, public spending, housing, schools, healthcare aren't abstract ideas. They're policies which affect real communities and real people every single day. One side argues that compassion has no borders. The other argues that the government's main and first priority is protecting its own people. And that is a debate worth having, not one for dismissal or slogans or accusations. If politicians are comfortable in their positions, they should welcome scrutiny rather than trying to shut it down. Hey Terry? Because good ideas don't fear debate. Weak ones usually do. But as always, I'd like to know what you think. So please do let me know in the comments below. Should a government always put its own people, citizens first, when money is scarce? Or should the UK's current approach stay unchanged? Please give it a like, hype, follow and share. Look after yourselves, take care, see you in the next video. Bye for now.